Welcome back to Pittsburgh Sports Live. It's Pirates postgame, kind of postseason, although there is no postseason action for the Pirates, obviously. Bucktober lasted a couple of days, and that was it. Once again, it was very, very short-lived. And, of course, well, this time it came without the heartbreak if you're a Buccos fan, and that's been the case for the past 6 seasons now as the Pirates finished at 61-101. I'm Matt Gajtka coming to you from Grand Rapids, Michigan, in my in-laws' broom closet, apparently. Please ignore my mess. Mike Asti and Mike D. Persak from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette are back in the old homestead in Pittsburgh, PA. Mike Persak, in fact, has been a frequent guest on these Pirates post games this year, and often with Mike Asti. And Mike Persak is from Grand Rapids, Michigan, from Jenison, actually, a suburb. So we got that connection going, Mike, even though we've never met until this very moment, basically.
Yeah, we did the little swap, just a classic. Everyone knows it, the Grand Rapids Pittsburgh swap. Everyone's experienced that at one time or another. Yeah, kind of a funny coincidence, I guess there.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of feel like an even trade, I guess you could say. You both bring something to the locations, and both have spread your wings in both locations. And Mike and I share a name. You share a affiliation with Grand Rapids. As we were talking about before the show, this is going to be the only broadcast of any kind that will have multiple mics and multiple Grand Rapids connections.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there you go. We have that going for us, which is nice at the start of this program. As I mentioned, last place finish for the Buccos in the NL Central. We want to talk more about big picture stuff, obviously, but also some of the minute details that only a guy like Mike Persak, who's there on the beat covering the team, can tell us. And of course, like I mentioned, Mike Asti hosted many Pirates post games this year. You know me, I like to follow the Buccos, whether I'm near or far. And we've been talking about where this team is on the grand scope of this rebuild under Ben Cherington and under this new regime. And that's what made it challenging all year. And I'll start with you, Mike Persak. What was your sense of how the team itself is handling the situation? Because these guys aren't stupid. From Derek Shelton on down, the players, the support staff, they realize this is not a team that's going to contend for anything at the start of the season. And it's a long 6-month slog. It's a trek for sure. And it wasn't like last year where they got a high draft pick, the highest of draft picks, for not that much suffering. This year was different with over 100 defeats and one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball. So as the ebbs and flows of the season went along, and more ebbs than flows, how did you feel like the team, starting with Derek Shelton at the top, handled things here? Because I know that obviously on the outside we can say, well, they're supposed to lose and they're supposed to get a high draft pick, but it's not so easy for the people trying to compete.
Yeah, well, I think that it's interesting with a rebuilding team and the way that they've kind of built this roster, because there really aren't many veteran holdovers or anything like that, guys just kind of biding their time. I think of even the Detroit Tigers, right, who have Miguel Cabrera suffering through awful seasons.
Right.
They don't have anybody like that. So it's still a lot of guys that are hungry to prove themselves, right? So even the losses, even the hard times, it's not really wasted time, because a guy Anthony Alford or Cole Tucker or whatever, they're still trying to prove themselves. So when that question comes up, I was always interested with guys like Brian Reynolds, who's relatively proven, and Jacob Stallings, who's relatively proven. How are you guys dealing with this? And I think Stallings was the most honest about it, where he just said yeah, man, really hope some of those prospects can hurry up. He was joking and being funny about it. But
well, he's one of the ones that are longer in the tooth than some of the others.
Definitely. Right. Yeah, definitely. There's, I don't know how long his career will last, but just by age wise, you assume he has less run than a Key Brian Hayes or Brian Reynolds. But he was just saying yeah, man, losing sucks. But unfortunately, this is part of the job. So you just kind of have to grind through it. That's all you really can do, and hope that the prospects hurry up and throw your trust on Ben Cherington and just keep plugging away,
And when we talk about this season as well, the Pirates were, looking for individual players to develop. And you almost have to put team success to the wayside when you're trying to evaluate where they are here. So Mike Asti, would you say Brian Reynolds was the most positive development of the season? Because we were a little concerned coming off of last year. Yes, it was 60 games, but which Brian Reynolds was it going to be? And we've now seen a lot more good than bad from Brian Reynolds at the major league level when you factor in 2019 and this year when he was a 6-win player per Baseball Reference. And I'm not sure you could have asked any more of the guy, honestly. So if there is one pillar of optimism here, for me, it's Reynolds. How do you feel about that?
If you're looking for a bright spot from this Pirates season, and it's a 100-loss season, it's one of the worst in franchise history. It's one of the worst in Major League Baseball history. And it had its entertaining moments for such a bad team. Mike and I actually talked about that on past post-game shows. I've talked about that with colleagues. It's kind of weird. It's a very entertaining, bad team this Pirates team has been this year in some ways. But a legitimate bright spot to carry with you to the offseason is the success of Brian Reynolds. Because we talked about this a lot last year, Matt, that Brian Reynolds had to be that extra piece. He had to be the Batman to Key Brian Hayes, or had to be the Robin to Key Brian Hayes' Batman. It had to be a second guy. He had to step up a little bit. Obviously, great 2 years ago. Maybe that was an aberration. Doubles every night aren't something that you would expect out of anybody. Last year, meaning 2020, a horrible season by many estimations for him. And of course, a lot went into that season. It was a bad year for really everybody on and off the field. But the Pirates desperately needed him in terms of the rebuild, with his age, with his ability, what they hope he could be, and needing that second guy with Key Brian Hayes, whoever is the Batman, whoever is the Robin. They needed both of them for him to show that he's closer at least to 2019. Even if he's not that guy, that he's closer to that guy than he was last year. And he's proven that. He absolutely has proven that he can be that guy, that he can be, along with Hayes, as part of the future of this franchise. I think Ben Cherington solidified for himself that Brian Reynolds and Key Brian Hayes are the two pieces that he would not trade, no matter what was offered potentially. Whereas prior to this season, I don't know if Brian Reynolds was in that category. Key Brian Hayes would have been. I don't know if Brian Reynolds would have been in that category. So him stepping up, him having such a great year. Obviously, Adam Frazier had an all-star season too, and then eventually was traded. And there was debate on if he should have been moved, but the age difference is part of that as well. And you're selling high on the value. But Brian Reynolds is that piece that once he started producing, you want to keep him in Pittsburgh. You want to make him part of that future. And him showing he can be that guy on and off the field as a leader in the clubhouse, from what I've heard from people who cover the team like Mike, as well as a quality player on the field. And that's what you need, offensive and defensive wise. So him stepping up and showing he can be that guy and he's part of your future, I think is the number one win for your franchise. Mike, I do want to ask you though, because speaking of wins for the franchise this year, and it's hard to find many when you lose 100 games. And I think Brian Reynolds, we would agree, is that win individually, since this is about evaluating individuals this season. Key Brian Hayes, that other name mentioned, and he wasn't mentioned that much this season. We've even talked about that on shows that, of course, started out the year hot, had the injury, re-aggravated things, gone for a while. No one really talked about him. Maybe that was the city focused on Steelers training camp, but no one talked about him. And then all of a sudden he comes back and the city still focused on Steelers training camp and then the NFL season and the Penguins, but he still didn't get much play. And then kind of struggled a little bit, didn't have the hot end to a season like he did last year, certainly left the national conversation that at the end of last season, people were saying he was one of the better players in all of baseball and would become that franchise guy. Obviously, that didn't happen because of injuries. Is maybe a loss for this year, or a better word, maybe a concern entering next season and leaving this season on. We now know Brian Reynolds is a piece for our future, and obviously Key Brian Hayes is an untradeable and is a part of your future based on his talent and his age. But does he still need to prove it and solidify himself as the Batman of this team? And is that still kind of an unknown leaving this season just because of how funky this year was for him? Or is he offered a mulligan because of his talent and what we've seen in flashes in the eyes of the franchise?
Yeah, I think he's offered a mulligan. I think that, like, I don't know. I think in a sense, from the outside, or from, like, if you're a fan or whatever, you can call this like sort of a lost year for him just because of those injuries.
Right.
Like wrist injuries linger, man. Like they really do. And he was talking about that. He said the other day that like after the All-Star break, it would pop up and slow, like, and calm down and whatever. Like they're constantly like lingering stuff with his hands. And we've asked him that. I know I've asked him that several times, like throughout the year.
You told me you're asking him. Yeah, I kept asking you, and you said I'm asking him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And his hand hurt. Like I was like, hey, does your hand hurt? Does your hand hurt? Does your hand hurt? He's like, no, I'm good. Like, I just need to, do this, and this, whatever. And then at the end of the year, he's like, yeah, I've been kind of battling through it since the All-Star game. And I was like, okay, well, I understand why he wouldn't say it during the season and would at the end of the season. Like, whatever, no sweat off my back. But even with all that, he was still a 2.5 WAR player. That's mostly defense. And like, that's not like if he's your franchise building cornerstone or whatever, like you would rather, you'd prefer a little bit higher there and a little better offensive showing. But the defense is like still elite. So, you can be satisfied with that and just say, hey, it was a tough break for you this year offensively. Go get healthy and we'll see what you can do next year. I think that's kind of how they're approaching it. I mean, there's really no other way that they would approach it. Like it's not like they're going to trade him in the offseason or anything like that. So
sure. Yeah.
So, I think that it is kind of a mulligan year, like tough luck. Like, thanks for trying to push through it. And even when he was hurt, like he was still hitting, like, there was obviously concerns with like different, like I know his launch angle was like supremely low and like, yep. There are concerns, but he was still getting on base like decently. It wasn't like terrible even with those lingering hand issues. So, I don't know. I think that you wait to see how he gets healthy and how he comes back next year, but I still don't think it's really like a huge negative or anything that anyone should be too terribly worried about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the launch angle there. It was average of 4 degrees, which is, like you said, very low. Yeah. He still hits the ball hard, even in an off year, even with the hand injury that apparently lingered. Looking at some baseball savant stats for him, some underlying numbers, his average exit velocity was still 70th percentile in the league. Hard hit was 75th percentile. But then you look at the actual results there, and even the expected slugging, the expected on base average, it's all really low, like 20th percentile and lower. And it's all because he doesn't hit the ball in the air. And I thought perhaps that he would develop the ability to get under some balls, get a little more backspin maybe, but just generally launch it a little bit higher and take advantage of that pop that he has. He has all the
that's what I mean. For opening weekend, we saw the pop. We saw the pop at the end of last year, and then we just didn't get to see any more of it. And I don't know, again, if it was the injury and then the re-aggravation. And honestly, Matt and Mike, we've all talked about this. It could also have been maybe the reason why anyone's asking about is their disappointment or concern is maybe the expectations and maybe the hype put on him were a bit unreasonable. We're looking at a month and a half, and national networks are saying he's going to be a cornerstone of the league. That might have been a little ridiculous. That might have been a little cart before the horse. I get what they're doing, promoting the sport, but maybe, he's still obviously very, very young and the talent's there. So there's a lot of room to grow. But if you're looking at great individuals, that's one to wince at with how this season did go, separate from the record.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely. I mean, he was unconscious like last season, right? Like it was 24 games and whatever, and you can talk till you're blue in the face about how it was 24 games, everyone take it easy, whatever. But people are gonna watch that and be like, "Oh, he's the truth." Like he was
headline
awesome.
News. He was leading the local news on a bad team in the middle of a pandemic. It was shocking.
Right. And then he comes back this year and first game goes yard. Like,
right.
Obviously the hype train has left the station at that point, right? Like, and understandably so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know what expectations really should be because that was such a small sample size, and because of the way injuries impacted him this year. Like, I'm not sure what he can be. But at the same time, saying that, I don't think I'm necessarily concerned yet either, right? Like Matt was pointing out, like those numbers aren't great. But if he comes back next year and is like, I'm healthy, I feel better, and he starts doing what he was doing, well, more towards what he was doing last year, then you say, hey, you know what? It is what it is. That injury must have sucked, man. Like, glad you're back, Like,
there's probably some odd pressure though on him though, because if he doesn't do that and he would struggle the first month and a half, even though young and very reasonable to do so, there could then be some critics that would pounce. And he does have the fortunate of playing in Pittsburgh where that could potentially go under the radar, like a lot of his struggles did this past season. Right.
But to me also, like, even if he did, even if this year were just like, this is what he is, like, there's obviously some concern there. But the defense is so good. Like I said, like he was still like sixth on the team in WAR by Baseball Reference or something like that. Like,
you just need offense from your best player. If you're going to be a playoff team, eventually you need offense from the best player more than what they're getting.
Right. What that does is it just means that some other like prospect or a free agent signing, LOL, like or whatever. Like,
right.
Let's not get too
yeah. Sorry.
Right.
They then have to be just that much better, and maybe Ke'Bryan Hayes is your number 7 hitter or something instead of being like, you know, in the 2 spot or whatever. And obviously that'd be disappointing given like the expectations, but he's still a really good player. Like, you know, it's still an upgrade over whatever else you would have had at third base.
I thought maybe you and Matt, I saw your eyes. I don't know if we had the same mindset. I thought maybe Mike was segueing into what we've been seeing in the minor leagues. If you're saying you're looking for another player to provide that offensive pop, maybe you don't have to worry about free agency in terms of that guy. Obviously, that's cart before the horse a little too.
Yeah, it's not going to happen if you're looking for some big offseason free agent signing. There might be good value to be had, which is different from a big signing.
Right.
Certainly like we've seen in the past, Russell Martin et al.
I mean the O'Neal Cruz too, though, is what I was.
Oh yeah, right, coming up, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not going to get the free agency, but maybe you'll get that guy offensively from a young stud that's already in your system.
Yeah, it's going to have to be that almost. Certainly, I would imagine some sort of a star level injection of talent would have to be from within the system. We talked about Reynolds, talked about, of course, Ke'Bryan Hayes. Hayes is in a different category for me, though. And when you talk about underperformance, he's a guy who still has the raw tools pretty obviously. And I think it's more about putting it together, perhaps working on some technique, just getting more seasoning at the major league level. But Mike Persak, what I'm really concerned about is a player like Mitch Keller, who doesn't even appear to have the raw talent or raw stuff, whatever you want to call it, that he was hyped to have had at some point in the minor leagues. And you break that one down however you want to do it. Whiff rate, terrible. Hard hit rate against, terrible. It's really quite stunning to see how hittable he is at the major league level, because we all thought that he had the stuff to at least get away with some mistakes. Now, don't get me wrong, he could still turn into a pretty good pitcher in the major leagues, and he could still work on his craft and polish it up and become a guy who hits the corners with consistency and succeeds that way. But I guess I feel like I've been sold a bill of goods here. I realize his prospect standing has gone downhill by all national measures, all national evaluators, and some local ones as well. But what's your take on expectations versus reality with Mitch Keller, who bounced back and forth between AAA and Pittsburgh this year, disappointingly?
I was saying to someone else that I have, like, entering the season, we knew that the team was probably going to be bad. And so I was looking at individuals saying, like, you're banking on Ke'Bryan Hayes, Mitch Keller, and Brian Reynolds. Like, you're really watching them to see how they bounce back in different ways and how they come into the season. And Mitch Keller, I still have a million questions about it. Like, I think that you're exactly right that this year we just saw there was just something missing, right? Like all the 2-strike trouble where he would get into 2-strike counts and then he can't get guys to chase anything and he can't get them to whiff on it in the strike zone. Like, I mean, it's obviously a bad recipe for success. Like, especially for a guy that, like you said, was billed to have like elite stuff and be kind of like a power strikeout guy. So to me, like, something either needs to change in like his arsenal with like the pitches he's throwing, or like, the ways that he can get like giddy up on his fastball or make his slider a little more biting or whatever. Like, something needs to change in that sense, or he needs to reinvent himself into like a contact pitcher. And I think we kind of saw that in like September, that he wasn't striking out guys, but he was having pretty good outings where he was more getting contact and ground balls, and he was getting a ton of double plays. So like, that was sort of encouraging, even if it's like different from what you would want Mitch Keller to be, like in theory, what you said, what you were sold. So yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where like he's going to get more chance, like he's going to get another chance next year, right? Like, I don't think any of us think he's going to like they're going to non-tender him or anything. I don't think you've seen enough to be like, oh yeah, it's over. I
mean, there are some calling for it. I don't think it's going to happen either. Obviously, you have that inside touch that we don't have, but there are some already jumping off the ship and feeling like he's a bust. Is that maybe an unreasonable opinion of theirs, or because there's more body of work now for another season than there would have been a year earlier when people were saying that? There's a little bit more now.
Definitely. Oh no, definitely. Like, I understand from a fan's perspective, but I think you kind of have to think of like, the ceiling for Mitch Keller, in my opinion, I don't know if you guys disagree, like you can go ahead and tell me, but the ceiling for Mitch Keller is still higher than say like Stephen Brault, Chad Kuhl, Dylan Peters, or whatever, like any of the guys that would ostensibly be replacing him in the rotation next year.
You would think years ago, people might have thought Chad Kuhl would have had a higher ceiling, but I don't think that's been evident now.
Yeah. So like, that's the only reason I really say that, like, he's going to get another chance next year. Like, I think, he actually said yesterday after his start that, like, I haven't earned anything. Like, I was not good this year. Like, I need to, like, go fix some things this offseason, come back and like actually prove that I can be here. And so, like, I guess that's sort of encouraging to hear, but it's also, it's probably true, but I think the Pirates will probably give him every opportunity to do so. Like, give him a plan this offseason, let him come back. And like, if that works, then great. If not, then you start to maybe think about it.
No, he pitched on Sunday, that one run off 3 hits. Or one run off one in 3 innings. I mean,
yeah. And one other thing that for that Sunday start, Derek Shelton was saying that that Oscar Marine, the pitching coach, gave him like something specific to work on, and was basically like, we're gonna try this thing specifically for this short start of like trying to get his arm like whippier, is the way that he put it. Like, and his velocity went up, his slider looked a little bit better. So maybe they found something there. So I don't know. I think they've tried a million different things with Mitch Keller this season. It would be hard for me to say that, oh yeah, the last thing they tried was the perfect thing and now he's fixed or anything like that. Like, right. He's got to prove it still, but I think he'll get, like I said, I think he'll get every opportunity to prove it.
Yeah, it's a game of adjustments for sure. And, even veterans of the most respected track records have ups and downs, but he's got to establish something. And if he doesn't work out, then this rebuild is further behind than we thought coming into the year. And I was excited about watching Mitch Keller this season. And by the middle of the year, even when he came back, talking to both of the mics here, even when he came back, I couldn't summon any excitement for it anymore because I hadn't seen much of anything. I want to see some more swing and miss. I want to see missing bats. And he just looked so readable, so hittable. And that's very discouraging. Of course, we saw it with Tyler Glasnow in a lot of ways, and he turned out to be a pretty good pitcher. And we hope he comes back well from that injury.
Yeah, and this is not the most analytical answer, of course. And this maybe connects to Tyler Glasnow. People said this about Tyler Glasnow when he was with Pittsburgh, that he just didn't feel it, didn't have that it factor. After a while, you would look at him and you didn't see the confidence being there, and he looked like deer in the headlights. All of a sudden, out of Pittsburgh, the confidence is there, the same talent, the same stuff is there, but there was something that picked him up, and eventually then, of course, pitched well and got himself in a World Series. But that's kind of what I saw from Mitch Keller most of this season, that eventually it just felt like deer in headlights. It almost felt like being sent down maybe was a good thing for him for a while to get himself out of the spotlight, try to fix things like Mike was talking about. But yeah, there's going to be more room to grow with him because you are still in the midst of a rebuild. Here, breaking news for Pirate fans. This team is going to likely be bad again next year. So next year is once again going to be about evaluating individuals. And this year successfully evaluated Brian Reynolds. If you want to be glass half full, if you want to be glass half empty, you can talk about Key Brian Hayes needing to do more, and Mitch Keller and several others. And even JT Brubaker that I was going to bring up, that beginning of the year, he looked like potentially emerging as a solid pitcher. That certainly faded down. And that's another one, Matt, that you bring up, that if they could get something out of somebody else to maybe replace the hype out of Mitch Keller, or if you get more out of Mitch Keller or something in there you get the catcher to feel like he's performing and leading the staff. But age-wise, is he going to be around for when you're good in 2, 3, 4 years, or whenever the case may be, for another playoff run like 13 to 15? If you got it out of Brubaker, then okay, that's fine to lose the hype out of Keller, but then that faded out. So certainly concerning question marks about the staff. And if anybody on this rotation could be part of a staff for a good winning team, even beyond the 4th or 5th guy, or however that would fit. And of course, some have been shipped out already. But with Mitch Keller, it was hard to watch him towards the end of the season, even middle of the season, because you didn't feel the confidence from him. You didn't feel like he was excited to be out there or get out of jams. Pitchers are going to have bad nights. Even Scherzer and Kershaw have bad nights, but they want to get out of it. They want to make it where they're only allowing 3 runs instead of 4 or 5 in a really bad inning. Mitch Keller gave you a vibe that he just wanted off the mound and home and to get to bed.
I think just going back to your earlier point, like one of the most interesting things, I guess, going into spring training next year is what this rotation looks like. Like there are so many. Who's a sure thing?
Do you have a prediction? You covered the team.
I got nothing, dude.
Who's a that's what I'm concerned about. The pitching staff. You got to find somebody eventually.
Right.
Who is a sure thing from like the 11 guys who made starts this year and will
there's
still
no
be
sure
around?
thing, but do you have any? Could you give me a ranking of
more
of a sure thing than others? In fact, no one is sure thing, but can we get a piece of the pie here?
I guess that I mean like sure thing, like who's going to actually pan out to be a good guy. Like
sure.
In terms of sure things for the rotation next year, like I think like I guess assuming they're still in the organization, I think Keller, Crow, and Brubaker, I would assume start the year in the rotation next year. I would guess that they keep Yahure, Kranick, and Contreras like down.
Yahure provided some excitement at one point.
Definitely, yeah, and he's still fine. Like his after the injury, his velocity went way down.
Right.
So like, I mean, you would hope that comes back. Oscar Marine was talking about like, yeah, they were aware of that and they think it'll come back. Might have just been like an injury thing, but I wouldn't be shocked to see those guys start down in AAA, and then it's like Stephen Brault and Dylan Peters. Like, I don't know. Like
JT Brubaker opening day starter. Is that where your money goes?
I don't know. I mean, who among that group deserves an opening day starter
right now? Yeah.
Well, somebody's gonna have to take the mound. I agree. Someone's got to take the mound.
Like, I think at that point, I would almost guess it would be Brault.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got the seniority, right?
Yeah. Maybe you just do it purely off of that. Maybe it's one of those old school office building situation where you've worked here the longest. Everyone here is not really any good, so sure, it's you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like,
yeah.
Bryce Wilson. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Right. Bryce Wilson's got to be in there too, probably instead of Dylan Peters, or if they want to move Brault to the bullpen or something. Bryce Wilson will be there.
Okay. Well, easy to forget about him too. So that's just how it is with pitchers. Sometimes in situations like this, you see so many of them that you tend to forget, even if you're around the team every day. One thing that wasn't very forgettable was Oneil Cruz's debut. Thank God we got some excitement there at the end of the season. And the ballpark was buzzing, Mike Persak, on Saturday night when Cruz made his debut. Had the hardest hit ball by a Pirate in the StatCast era in his first game, reaching out, not even really turning on a pitch. 118 miles an hour as that catches your eye. Of course, he had the first home run, another more or less a flick of the wrist. So clearly he brings the frame. You would call it a projectable body if this were the NFL draft, of course. And who knows if he stays at shortstop, but at the very least, it's somebody that Pirates fans can dream on. And is it possible that he's a little bit closer to the major leagues than we thought? Because I was figuring maybe midseason debut next year, maybe a September call-up. I just felt like he was too raw to really expect to be here in 2022 full-time. But was this more than just a sneak peek and a quick look for the Pirates at Oneil Cruz?
I think it was. Like, I think that this was kind of born out of, like, listen, this dude, like, we can't keep this guy down, like, this year. As long as we have opportunities, especially once Brian Hayes hit the injured list. Obviously, it wasn't until a few days later that they brought him back up because they were needed starts, and so they brought up Contreras and Yahure and whatever. But like, and Tanner Anderson, can't forget Tanner Anderson. but yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of like, listen, reward this guy, because when he went up to AAA, he hit 5 home runs in his first 6 games. Like, reward this guy. We got a spot. We've got like a bunch of fans coming in Saturday. I don't know. I think all of those things probably played into it a little bit.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's closer than I thought, like, before this year, especially. I think during Altuna's season this year, I was like, okay, this guy's actually like really killing it down there. Then he got hurt. And so I assumed, like, all right, pump the brakes a little bit, let him get healthy, don't push him too much. They bring him up to AAA and he rakes again. So it's like, you know, what more do you want to see? I don't think one thing that's like worth pointing out is he won't be on the opening day roster for next year. Like, it would be silly to put him on the opening day roster just because you'd lose a whole year of control just to just for like 15 extra games or whatever.
And
So,
that's
like,
not a small deal to the Pittsburgh Pirates at all.
That and nor should it be. Like, honestly, like with a prospect like that, like you can wait 50, like, however many days you need to wait, like fine, wait, like it doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean the home run, I can't stop. Like, I can't talk enough about the home run in Pittsburgh. Like, what unbelievable. It was a pitch off the dirt and he just goes down and gets it. And like you said, like flick of the wrist, goes 408 feet out onto the Riverwalk. Like, I mean, good God, what more? Like,
who's had that kind of power and pop on this team in a long time? People may have thought it was Ke'Bryan Hayes. Matt, you brought up earlier that maybe that's not him. He's going to get on base, but if they can find a guy to give you that, that's already a major plus. Whenever he is.
So I wasn't around at the beginning. Was Josh Bell like that? Was that like the last guy that people thought was kind of that kind of power?
I guess maybe the last guy people could have thought was that guy. Obviously, that tailed off at the end. I would say beginning in terms of hype that maybe that was him and then maybe Pedro Alvarez before.
Definitely Alvarez, yeah. When you're talking pure power, I'd never seen anyone hit the ball like Alvarez did in certain situations.
Right.
He had a special
that tapered off too. Yeah.
For sure. And Bell, I'm still disappointed in the Josh Bell development there. I just felt like he had the hand-eye coordination to supplement that power and become an all-around type guy. But you saw in Washington, he pretty much did what he was doing in Pittsburgh. So maybe that's just who he is. And maybe we all need to temper our expectations.
This is a complete diatribe. And I won't last on it too long. But did you see that Josh Bell was playing left field for the Nats against the Red Sox?
No.
Yeah.
I actually did let that miss me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that season finale, he was playing left field against the Red Sox.
Well, that's kind of what Matt's saying too. That if somebody keeps telling you who they are long enough, eventually you just believe them. That's the case with Josh Bell as a Major League Baseball player. Maybe it was not. Maybe he's one of those few that wasn't just the Pirates stink on him. Maybe he's not been able to pick it up.
Yeah, he's a serviceable major league player. We were just expecting more from that. Maybe just because of that whole signing bonus thing and how.
I think the fans expected more. I think the fans expected more for sure. I think this rebuild would not be where it is now if he was able to give more. I think they were thinking this would be quicker if he was able to give more. And then last year, the value wasn't there from him as well. Yeah, for sure.
Mike Persak, most likely to be back with the Pirates next year out of these guys who've been passed around a little bit, most likely to contribute for the 2022 Pirates. Yoshi Tsutsugo, Ben Gamel, or Michael Chavis? Who do you like out of that trio? Is any of this real? Can we draw anything from what we saw from these guys late in the season?
I think most likely to be back is Michael Chavis, and the reason that I think that is because he has a small sample size.
Okay.
He's the guy.
Say plus control, but yeah.
Well, that too, and like probably I don't know, maybe Yoshi has the highest ceiling, but to me, like Chavis might have the highest ceiling just because of like his prospect status and like what people thought he was as he was coming up. Not that necessarily means anything like once you get to the big leagues, but yeah, I mean, he didn't play much. When he did play, he looked pretty good. I can't remember what are his final season numbers. He hit over 300 for sure.
357 with a 500 slug in just 42 plate appearances. So not a lot, but
that's a small sample size.
And definitely small, and that's like worth noting. But I think just what he showed you in a small sample. I mean, this is kind of the same conversation that we had with Anthony Alford last year, right? Where Anthony Alford had like 6 games. Got injured, ran into the wall, and they brought him back, and he made the opening day roster. So, like, to me, it's the same kind of situation where you took a chance on this guy. He did, he showed pretty good numbers while he was here. Didn't play much until you bring him back next year, see what he can do then. Like, it's no real harm done. Yoshi, I guess I would then go Ben Gamel and then Yoshi, just because Ben Gamel has control, right? Like, you're not worried about him signing back. And Ben Gamel was solid. He wasn't like flashy, and I think he struggled a little bit more like down the stretch, but he was fine and certainly like worthy of at least being a 4th outfielder, if not a little bit more, depending on what you have on your roster next season. And then Yoshi, like, we'll see what the free agency brings, right? Like he becomes a free agent. They obviously didn't sign him before the end of the year. He really struggled a little bit down the stretch too. So, I don't know. Everyone was free. Do you remember when he first got called up and everyone was like, you got to sign him now because he's pricing himself out of the Pirates.
Like, he's come back and maybe he's humbled himself to try again. Yeah.
Yeah, like everybody slow your roll on that a little bit. Like he probably was never going to be all that expensive anyways, even if he kept up that pace. Like his career numbers speak for themselves. So like we'll see what that brings. But I don't know. I actually have a question that was brought up to me earlier for you guys. But who do you feel more confident if you could only have one playing first base next year? Would you rather have Yoshi or Colin Moran?
Wow.
I'd go Colin Moran. I've seen more from him, and I think he's fine. I think he's a player that you can win with. He's not going to lead the charge by any stretch of the imagination, but he's developed himself into a reliable major league hitter. I feel pretty good when he comes to the plate. I'll say that much. And now that they got him off third base, I think he's totally fine over at first. So
I think Colin Moran as well. I think it maybe depends on, again, because next year's not going to be about wins and losses either, really, for Ben Cherington. You're more of an evaluation. How much is Colin Moran a part of your future? What are your thought process in terms of him being there whenever you are actually a winning team? But I do think Colin Moran is one of those players in the last 2 years. So this past season of 21 and then even in 20, that he kind of emerged as a legitimate player on a roster. And for a while, well, that was a question for a while.
Yeah. But I hear you.
And he also was one of those few players that provided a brief, even if brief, and he still has this, of course, but there was a brief week or 2 or 3 where he maybe could be that bopper for you. So if you have a chance to have somebody like that can provide you some offense, isn't killing you defensively, I think first is where he have to be if you're going to have him in the lineup. I think certainly with this team offensively, he earns a spot being there. So to make next season as best as you can for the team and not have it be another 100-loss season, have it be a progression into the right direction, even if obviously next year's not a playoff year by any means, I think Colin Moran would be that guy as well. I do have one question for both of you, and actually this is going to be a question that's always on fans' minds, and maybe it's a negative to discuss right now, but just season recap. This is the Pittsburgh Pirates, and it's going to be brought up again next year. Who's the player for you that I guess is on the trade block entering next season? Meaning a player like an Adam Frazier that could step up, perform, and provide you some value as part of the rebuild. So while that might be an annoying question, that could be a piece that's used to better the franchise into the future, like the thought process with Adam Frazier. I don't know if anybody thought a year ago he was going to do what he did and then eventually was moved because of it. Is there a guy that can do that? Or did they max out that guy and they're going to make trades, but there might not be that opportunity again?
Yeah, there might not be that guy. I'll fire away. If they bring back Jacob Stallings, then I think he's your guy that you sign in the hopes that he does something, because everyone could use a catcher, although catchers aren't traded as much as other position players due to the familiarity needed with the pitching staff. Of course, when you change teams, even change leagues, that could be a little drastic. But I kind of half expected him to be traded this season, and he didn't. That was
brought up by many.
He's again, talk about just solid guys in the lineup, and Stallings has made leaps and bounds. He had really no hype coming through the system.
I think he's one of the more underrated players in all of baseball.
Yeah, this year was really terrific for him when you take into account the expectations there and the fact that he was expected to be a light hitting catcher, and he was better than that, I think, at least for most of the season. Mike, what do you think about it?
I don't really know how to, it's hard for me to answer the original question. I think that Jacob Stallings is maybe the best candidate, but I also think that there's a complete dearth of possibilities behind him if you trade him. And not that that's necessarily like you said, it's not necessarily about wins and losses. And if you can get a bunch of value for him, fine.
Next guy up's Henry Davis, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. Or they had Christian Bethencourt had a decent year at AAA. I don't know. Are you willing to just bank on those guys and maybe ride with I don't know if Michael Perez will be around next year, but are you willing to ride with a guy like Michael Perez as your starting catcher for most games? We saw even when Stallings is on the bench, or was injured on the 7-day IL with a concussion late in the season, it was only Michael Perez and Taylor Davis. Oh, brother, those, Michael Perez had a really bad year at the plate. So
I think it's not even just offensively, but what Jacob Stallings brings to the entire team. He almost screams like somebody who maybe could be a coach or manager someday in terms of he's kind of filled into being a legitimate major league player now the last couple of years, underrated, but also a leader of the team, as weird as that is to say for a bad team, and a leader of the staff. And obviously the staff needs to improve. We don't have a guy out there that anyone can be excited about, but there were brief points of JT Brubaker and Anderson and others that showed you something of being part of a staff when they're winning. And you also got to give Jacob Stallings credit for that. So part of what Matt was bringing up, that catchers are very rarely traded, and it's catastrophic when they change leagues sometimes. Only really Pudge Rodriguez was able to do it at success. Usually you have Molina. When you have a Hall of Famer like Posier Molina, you keep him forever, even more than other cornerstones, because you're losing the position as a hitter, but more importantly, the pitching staff. So is that maybe even a concern of, obviously maybe when you get to his value so high, you have to maybe do something. But that might have been why he wasn't moved this year, that it could kaplunk the entire offseason build, really hurt this staff. Are you going to get enough for him with the risk of hurting the pitchers in addition to him as well as they're trying to improve?
Right. I kind of think he's a guy that sticks around for a couple of years here until Henry Davis comes up and shows he's ready, and we'll see whenever that is. But yeah. So anyways, but to bring up your original point, of like guys that could show up and like get traded, like Colin Moran, maybe like he might be a good option for that. As a guy who, like, if this guy can stay healthy for a full year, which is kind of an if, but if he can stay healthy and like show sort of out to the best of his abilities, or like, you know, what he was doing earlier this season, then he's a guy that could have some value there. And you don't mind trading a first baseman, given, you know, Mason Martin is up in AAA now and we'll see what he is, or if Yoshi's still around, like, you know, you got guys that you can shift around there. So, you know, maybe there's that, but it might end up being like a free agent, right? Like kind of what we saw with Tyler Anderson. Cause I do think that they're running out of options for candidates to really pop off and be super valuable at the trade deadline. You know, it's hard for me to look at this roster and say that I have a lot of confidence in anybody really doing that.
Right.
I suppose we could look at relievers too.
Chris Stratton was
they
one,
wouldn't dare trade him, would they?
No, I don't think so. I think Stratton is a good example, though. He might get dealt this offseason. Like, I think he looked really good for them, and he's 32 now or something like that. So you know, I think him going into a, like, you know, they traded all their late inning guys at the trade deadline, and now Chris Stratton was suddenly like your 8th, 9th inning guy. And he looked good. So I think that probably upped his trade value. Maybe in the offseason, that's one to look for.
He is 30, by the way, just to.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah, same ballpark.
You don't want to add any years on to him, but that's almost same difference for the Pirates.
So what do we think about Ben Cherington? Is he going to shift this into a different gear this offseason, or does he just have to stay the course for another year at least, maybe even 2 years before he really knows what he has? I can't imagine this team is going to compete in 2023 at this point, although I guess anything is possible. The Detroit Tigers improved by 30 games over the past 2 seasons, and I thought they were pretty dead in the water too. So yeah. Surprises can happen, and things can change for the positive. It's not all negative here in Pirates land, even though it feels like it for most of the past 3 decades or so. So I guess for either one of you, how do you feel about how Cherington should pursue this offseason? Is there an opportunity to go value shopping and perhaps at least bring in some players with some trade value for 2022?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, there is. This free agent market is really good. I think that there's like a ton of people who are free agents that are really valuable players. Like if I just go down the list I'm on Spot Track right now, and the starting pitchers, first of all, Greinke, Verlander, Kershaw, and Scherzer are all free agents. I don't think they're going to sign any of those guys, but isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Buster Posey as like a team option or something like that. Chris Bryant's a free agent. Marcus Stroman's a free agent. Kevin Gausman, Marcus Semien, Freddie Freeman, Dexter Fowler, Kenley Jansen, Brandon Belt. Like there's a ton of guys, and I'm not saying that all of them are going to hit the open market or won't sign back or anything like that. But I think there's some real value because there's a very flooded free agent market where you might be able to pick up a guy that other teams, you know, say everyone's in on the Carlos Correa sweepstakes or Marcus Semien sweepstakes. and you can slide in and say, hey, Javi Baez, like come over. And I'm not saying it'll be him, but you know
that's
what
happened
like,
last year.
Some opportunities. There's going to be some opportunities there. Yeah.
Maybe it was COVID, but there were some guys that everyone pounced on one or two. They let it linger, and then other guys were waiting for jobs, and maybe you could go after them. Yeah.
Michael Conforto's one I think of too. Kutch is there, like people who are sorry. I mean, maybe that's the perfect one, and we don't have to look any further. But
that's probably what they're gonna do, honestly. If I got to put my money down on what you've named so far, and Kutch still loves Pittsburgh, and obviously that would be criticized as just bringing back the kid. Although he's been a good player out of Pittsburgh, but that would be the one if I could bet. That would be the one to do. If they're going to
I think I'm pretty sure. Hold on, let me see. I think Marte is also a free agent, just so you know. But so
he should have been the batting champ this year, but he got screwed because of that stupid archaic rule where you have to flip your batting average to 0 when you change leagues. So bring
back Greg too. Just run it back. Let's go. But no, anyways, the larger point is that I think that they can pick and choose and say. Right field is a spot that I think of, especially and that's why Kutch makes a lot of sense too. Like if you can pick up a guy who's not super expensive and you can fill him in right field, you are immediately improving your team. You can add a veteran presence. You can add a guy, maybe if you want to trade him at the deadline, all of that's still true. All of those things are still on the table. They already wiped out a ton of salary at the trade deadline by getting rid of Frazier and Polanco and whatever. You have money to spend. That seems like a good spot to do it. I think that that's the angle that they should take. If it's a veteran guy, whatever. If it's a guy that you think has upside value that's maybe a little younger, that works too. But I think they need to spend some money, and they're not really blocking anybody, especially in the outfield. I don't think you should really worry about that. You should just try to go find some value plays out there.
It does feel like next season is a year that, to be real, as much as everyone criticizes the Pirates' spending habits, and for due reason, many could argue they broke up the 2015 team too soon, etc. But this past season, 2021, entering this year, there would have been no point to spend money. It would have just been a waste of money. You knew what this season was going to be. Ben Cherington knew what was happening here. It was the first time that any executive with the Pirates in years, I think part of the fans' annoyance with the previous regime was he would go on radio shows, go on appearances and say, we're giving it our all, basically, to paraphrase. And it's like, come on. Ben Cherington is a little bit more honest about the rebuild and willing to actually flirt with saying the word rebuild in terms of it actually happening. And I think that's something that personally I respect, that he's actually treating some of us and media and fans, hey, we're not idiots. We know what's going on. So let me be aware. Let's not, it doesn't need to be a wink, wink. We're all intelligent people for the most part here. Let us know what's going on here. So that was occurring. So there was no need to spend money this year. It would have absolutely been a waste of money this year. Would have been albatross of money this year. Next year, though, I do think there maybe should be a little bit more to show some level of interest. If you go into next season with the same situation in terms of salary, when you're avoiding maybe chances to spend that are there to at least better yourself in this process, the critics are going to return. They're going to return nationally. They're going to once again say that the ownership doesn't really care about winning and the money's not going to be there no matter what, and it'll only be a certain level, because it is also a fact that there are small markets that have won more. It is also a fact that there are most teams and most franchises throughout Major League Baseball have been at least to a championship series in the last almost 30 years now, and the Pirates have not, and they maybe closed the window too early. So all of that will come back if you don't spend a little bit more. You don't need to get too frivolous because it's not going to be a winning season either. I think the Kutch thing is interesting because he's still a productive player now. If it was just a homecoming, then that would not be smart, but he's still a productive player, can be that for you, can fill a need. If I'm Kutch, though, I don't know if I want to do it. You had the great run. Pirate fans love you. You didn't lose the love from Pirate fans when you left, and you're several teams removed now. At this point in his career, if I'm him, I want to win. And I know the Pirates are not winning a pennant next year. If I'm signing Kutch, it's to a 1 or 2 year contract. It's not to a 5 or 10 year contract. So it's a bridge gap situation. You're making him the outfield veteran like a Stallings for your team. If I'm him, I don't want to do that. But I could see the thinking for the Pirates. But in terms of Ben Cherington, I don't think there's any reason right now, as we're leaving the 2021 season, for anyone, even the staunchest critic to say that Ben Cherington has failed, or hasn't done his job, or isn't doing what he said he was going to do, or any reason to jump off the ship. He's giving you what he said. He has a proven track record. Of course, winning with the Red Sox is not like winning with the Pirates. Maybe he got in more than he thought it would be. Maybe this is a tougher job than he thought it would be. This is still a several year long process. He knows the challenge, but there has been some development. The minor league system is not bare. There are some players that are stepping up, being part of the future. So this was a bad year. It was a really, really bad team, a really bad year. And again, they're going to suck again next year. But he was brought in to be given several years, to be given rope. So there are pieces, as I mentioned, even with how he comes off to media, that I think makes you have a little bit more confidence in the fact that he had done it before. Granted, as we all know, it's quicker to rebuild things with Boston when if you swing and miss at a Mitch Keller that we talked about earlier in the show, you could fix it by a free agent signing or another fix. If you swing and miss at Mitch Keller here, or Brubaker doesn't become more, or if Colin Moran doesn't provide you that trade piece and value, or if something else doesn't work for you, then you really are screwed and it could be years backward. So we're talking about all these pieces, all these individuals. But if nothing pans out with any of them, you really are hurt. And I don't think anyone will be able to fix things. So the Pirates go into another season next year, once again, putting all their chips in the middle of the table, knowing they're not going to win in their heart of hearts, and needing certain individuals to step up, certain things to occur to get value, to move on to the future. And if they don't, like in 2020, when none of that happened, you are backwards yet again. But I am not the most optimistic guy, I will say, with the franchise, but I think there's reason to believe right now in trusting the process of Ben Cherington. But who knows? There's a ceiling on everything, and it obviously cannot be 3-4 years from now when we're still having the same conversation. Maybe he wouldn't even want to still be around and probably has some frustration as we speak.
Mike, Persak, I have one thing for you. I don't have anything to add to that. Basically, I completely agree. It's just you have to wait. But Mike, you grew up here. We'll bring this thing full circle. You're a Michigan man, or at least from Michigan. I don't want to put any college allegiances on you there. Are you a Michigan man? Or just
I am, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, neither here nor there. When it comes to covering the Pirates, how do you find the fan base in Pittsburgh? Mike, Asti, and I are both from Pittsburgh, obviously, so we're kind of, it was baked into our souls to be cynical about the Pirates. I think, especially Pirates from this century, basically.
Yeah. We're around the same age.
Yeah. They've shown us, when to believe and when not to believe, and it's usually when not to believe. But how have you found this experience? You came from an area up here where, for a while, the Tigers spent like they were the Yankees, and they did a great job of making themselves into a perennial contender, and now they're trying to do it the more traditional through the system, the minor league system way. But do you find people are still receptive to the messages the Pirates are putting out there? You're the conduit for a lot of these things. So how toxic is the Pirates fan base right now?
It's split, right? Like there are plenty of people, and honestly, the most interactive people are pretty patient, I think, right now. I think that's probably, I have found that it's probably a younger crowd, that the younger folks who maybe grew up, or not grew up, but the 2013 through 2015 teams fell in the prime of their fanhood or whatever. I think those people are pretty willing to see it out and understand that the farm system is better than it has been in quite a long time, and that it's a different regime and whatever. I think that there's also the other side of the fan base who when O'Neal Cruz hits a home run and you write something on O'Neal Cruz, they reply, well, man, he's going to look great in a Yankees uniform. Or what I'm saying? So I think it's both those things, but I think both are I'm not one to, I think I understand both sides of it. Like, I get it. Like, even if the people who, are unreceptive to everything, no matter what, because they've just been hurt so many times. Like, even if that gets a little tedious to deal with, I get where they're coming from. Like, I understand it. And I think the Pirates know that too. Like, Ben Cherington has talked about it before about we got to prove it, man. Like, we're okay with like that's when it came up a lot when Gregory Polanco was getting like booed out of PNC Park, and he was asked about it and was just saying, this is something that our players need to be prepared to hear if they're not up to snuff. Like with that, like it's okay. Like fans are going to tell you what they think, and like that's okay. They should expect winning, and we're hoping to bring it to them. But if we stink, like that's all right. It's okay for them to be mad about that. Like we don't want to stink either. So, I guess in that sense, like I understand where people are coming from either side. Although I do appreciate the people who are nicer to me. That's all.
Take out on your hardworking beat reporters. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. Don't hate the messenger, but I do think there has, honestly, everyone I've talked with that has covered the team in some capacity at some point, and I've covered a lot in Pittsburgh sports and never actually was on the Pirates beat. Matt has that experience. Eventually came to terms with understanding both sides, because it's one of those rare things in the world that not many people in this world understand and relate to both sides of every issue. It's kind of hard for people to do, kind of an issue in our society in general, but it really feels like people looking at things logically give that answer, especially people that cover the Pirates, that look, it's annoying to hear every positive story be met with, there's no reason to write about this. There's a 0% chance of ever winning a pennant. But I could understand where you're coming from, because, again, the Royals had back-to-back pennants and a ring. Where Milwaukee built themselves up. You mentioned the Tigers. Before the Tigers did what you said, Matt, they had 16 years of losing, and then all of a sudden they're winning a pennant. It feels like the Pirates' time to do that was 13, 15, and everyone else, when they get the time to do it, gets at minimum a championship series appearance. Even the Mariners had that at one point in the last 30 years, even though they can't get back in the playoffs, and they were so close. They appear closer than the Pirates, for crying out loud. The Nationals have won a championship after being futile. The Rays have appeared in 2 World Series after losing 100 games year after year. And I'm sure Pirate fans are going to say, with all those examples, either they missed the boat at 13, 14, and 15. One of those should have been a championship series at minimum to at least get that out of 3 decades, and you didn't. You broke it up too soon. It's not Cherington's fault at all, but that's going to get in everyone's craw. And then, you got to have some logical evaluation that the cupboard's not bare. You have O'Neal, Cruz, Brian Hayes. There's youth there. There are franchises where it's way worse in terms of their situation, but it is really hard, and it's almost a disservice to logic to not at least be able to understand where someone's coming from if they say, well, honestly, I don't know. I'll only believe it when I see it. And I think maybe even if I'm Ben Cherington, I believe a little bit because I was told. I know I've done it before. I'm doing it now. We're on a process. I'm getting some success in terms of the individuals, even though the team not. But if I'm him, in my back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I got to wait too. When I get to a point of where this team is on the precipice, for us journalists, you guys might like that word, the precipice of something, I got to see some dollars spent, like Mike brought up. If I don't, then I might go into the owner's office and say, hey, what is your real goal here? Was I sold a bill of goods? Because eventually the chickens have to come to roost, and that has to occur. And if that doesn't occur, or if it's broken up too soon again, like some think, then maybe he feels like the wool will pull over his eyes. You just don't know. It's a wait and see. My last question, though, I do want to ask before we end this, Mike Persak, since you covered the team this year, do you believe Derek Shelton is the guy as the manager whenever this team is back to winning? And what is your evaluation of him right now? Because like Cherington, it's not really fair to evaluate him in terms of wins and losses, because he knew it wasn't going to be a winner right away when he took the job. Everyone else knew it wasn't going to be a winner right away when he took the job. There's some decision-making that some don't love. I don't know if you can cling to record. There has been some improvement in some capacity and some development, but is he going to be there whenever they win, which is clearly still years down the road? And what are your thoughts on him as a major league manager, just in general, based on the situation that he has been dealt with?
So I think that next year is a big year for him to. Well, okay, so I'll just put it like this: as the year's gone on, I feel that Derek Shelton has managed this team knowing that it's a rebuild. I wasn't so sure early in the year, especially with some of the pitching decisions, right? That we talked about with, like, guys would go 6 innings or whatever and be on 77 pitches and he'd pull them. I get why that's frustrating to people. And it was, it's a little befuddling while you're watching it, but especially at the end of the year, it was this last Will Crow start actually, where he went 6 innings and looked really good and could have come out for the 7th inning, and he didn't put him in for the 7th. And he was saying, I couldn't live with myself if he got hurt after a long layoff, because there's a review in the bottom of the 6th inning and it got like a 30-minute half inning. And not to say that every single decision's been exactly like that, but I feel pretty confident in saying that he would manage differently if this were a team that he thought was like that was really talented and it wasn't full of young guys. And there were like veterans on the team that he could trust. Like the only guy he ever let go like 8 or 9 innings. Well, I don't know if he ever went 9 innings, but the only guy he ever let go 8 innings was Tyler Anderson. He's a veteran who's been around the block. So I feel like it's still incomplete, and I know that that's unsatisfying to some people, but I still feel like he's benching people or taking them out of the lineup and forcing them into a rest day just because, they've been playing a long time. Like there's nothing really to play for. So Brian Reynolds, you take the season finale off because you hit over 300 and you can sit on that and feel good about it. So I don't know. I still think it's an incomplete. I think that to answer that question confidently, I'd have to see him on a team that deserves a manager really trying to go for it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I can't say, I can't feel confident saying that he'll be around whenever this team is good, but I also can't feel confident saying that he doesn't deserve to be, I guess.
For me, it's harder to evaluate him than anybody else. Cherington's pretty difficult even at this point of the rebuild, but for Shelton, I don't know what he's supposed to even be doing.
Right.
Only they know what they want him to be doing. And they're not going to reveal all that detail to us. So it's a total cipher for me. I think I like the guy, but it's even hard to tell that much because I'm just seeing him through a television screen or through my radio receiver, honestly. So Mike Persak would know more about him and how he's handled every question basically that he's faced this season. But even that is, like you said, it's you have to see him in a spot where it's a competitive team or a team that's actually trying to win. And maybe life's good for Derek Shelton because of that, because I don't want to say there's no accountability, but there's not that obvious scoreboard that 25 out of the 30 major league managers are looking at every day and worrying about.
Yep. I agree completely.
All right. Well, if you guys are good, I'm good on the Buccos season 2021. We can move on to the off season. It was a lot of defeats, but you know what? What were they, like the 5th worst? There were a lot of teams that lost 100 games this year.
Yeah. Who had that? I mean, you had a kind of a weird year where first time the Dodgers win 106 and don't win a division.
Oh, that was crazy.
Yeah. And then you get, of course, the Pirates being so bad, losing 100 and necessarily not being the worst team in baseball throughout most of it, the Diamondbacks, etc. So, and some entertaining baseball if you really watched out of a really bad team. There were some moments there. What an ass
than they deserved. I think it was good for Pirates fans, especially the Pirates fans who were there in person again.
Yeah, let's just say it. It's my word. This was an asinine season for the Pirates and Major League Baseball.
It applies. Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Where can the folks find your works of not just baseball, but anything that you're putting on the pages there, both in print and on the website for the Post-Gazette?
Yeah, absolutely. Like they said, Twitter is at Mike D. Persak. That's Persak. But yeah, anywhere, postgazette.com/sports, baby. I'll be all over that, doing whatever they ask me to do. A little bit of Pirates off season, a little bit of other stuff, I'm sure. So, go find everything I do there.
The few, the proud, the Pirates beat reporters. I was there, man, like Mike alluded to. But when I was there, it was a little bit easier because they were still trying to win at that point.
Right. And
even then, I got nihilistic. So take a break, man. Take a breather. That's all I got to say. It took me a while to feel like a human being again after those.
Yeah, I didn't do it on the beat, but I've been there in the press box covering them for the trip to other places, and yeah, I could feel that energy from you guys.
It's a march, man. It is a serious march.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to tell me twice to take a load off every now and again.
Right.
I'll be all right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hope you enjoyed watching the show, everybody. Putting a capper on the Pirates season and looking forward to what's to come here. Like we said, they're not the sexiest team in the offseason, but if you're watching the Pirates, if you're watching the show, you already know that. So you know the drill. That's why I like doing these, because we're mostly talking to the diehards. We don't have to lay out all the context each and every time. For Mike Persak of the Post-Gazette, for Mike Asti right here of Pittsburgh Sports Live, I'm Matt Gajtka. You want some egg cartons? I got them for you here in the back. Hopefully next time I have a better backdrop for this. But hey, that's where life takes you. We'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Sports Live.
It's fitting for this Pirates season.